Welcome to On One Condition or More, Conditional Relative Frequency Distribution. This lesson falls under the larger topic of two variable categorical data. Throughout our study of this topic, we have looked at various ways of representing and displaying two variable categorical data, including two-way frequency tables, marginal frequency distributions, and even visual displays like stacked bar graphs. In this lesson, we are going to focus on the conditional relative frequency distribution and the two different tables that are possible given the different variables being considered in the scenario. So let's go ahead and begin with a definition. A conditional relative frequency distribution shows the percent or ratio of occurrences of a category given the specific value of another category. When we are creating the conditional relative frequency distributions, there are two different tables that are possible dependent upon the two different variables being considered in the scenario. So throughout this video, we're going to focus on the same scenario and we will generate the two different conditional relative frequency distributions that are possible with that same data. So here's the scenario that we're going to consider. This table shows the grades of Mr. Lewis's science students. We can see from this table that he teaches three different courses: biology, chemistry, and physics. And then we can see the different grades that are possible across the top. So of course an A, B, C, D, or F. This is a marginal frequency distribution because we have the totals included at the bottom of each column and at the end of each row, with the total data points included in the bottom right cell. From that marginal frequency distribution, we can create a marginal relative frequency distribution, which is where we find the ratios or percentages for each cell out of the total. So you can see in this table on the bottom here that we have each of the values from the cells. So for example, if we look at the students receiving an A in biology, there were 6 of them. And now we can see that for the marginal relative frequency distribution, we take that 6 and divide it by 65 to get 9 2/10%. We've done that in each cell, dividing by 65, including in the bottom right where we have 100% of our data being represented there. So now let's go ahead and try to create a conditional relative frequency distribution. So for this first table, we are going to consider this based on the course that the students are in. So when we look at the first cell, so students that received an A in biology, there were 6 of them, which I can see from my marginal frequency distribution. And we are going to consider this relative solely to the other students in biology. So I can see at the end of that row, there are 20 students enrolled in biology. So when I set up that ratio of 6/20, that is equal to 30%. We can do that same thing for each of the cells, but let's do a couple more examples. Let's look at students that received a C in chemistry. So I can see from my marginal frequency distribution, there were 12 of them. Out of the students just that are enrolled in chemistry, there are 30 of them. And when I do that division, I get 40%. Let's do one more on this table. So let's look at students that got a D in physics. So there was 1 student who received a D in physics out of 15 total students enrolled in physics. And when we do that division, we get approximately 6 7/10%. When I do that for each of those cells, here is the final conditional relative frequency distribution that we end up with. Now, like we said in the introduction of this video, there will always be 2 conditional relative frequency distributions that can be created. So this first one here was relative to the other students enrolled in that course. Let's go ahead and try to create that second table. This time it will be relative to the other students that received that same letter grade, regardless of what course they were in. So let's go ahead and look at that same first cell, students that received an A in biology. So we had 6 students that received an A in biology. Out of this time, instead of looking at the total that are enrolled in that course, we're going to look at the 12 total students that received an A. So again, relative to the students that received the same letter grade. So 6 out of 12 of them are enrolled in biology, and that is equal to 50%. Let's do a couple more examples here. Let's look at students that got a C in physics this time. So we had 6 students that received a C in physics out of 23 total students that received a C from Mr. Lewis. And when we do that division, we get approximately 26 1/10%. Let's try one more. Let's look at students that failed chemistry. So we can see that there are 2 students that received an F in chemistry out of a total of 5 students that received an F overall. And when we do that division, we get 40%. So again, we'll complete that for each of our cells, and this will be our final conditional relative frequency distribution. Thank you so much for watching.